Hello, everyone. On today's podcast episode, I'm going to talk about something that I heard a while back. It's a it's a conspiracy theory. I don't really believe in most conspiracy theories, especially this one because it's unbelievable. But it's about the British royal family. There's a conspiracy that says that Queen Elizabeth is a shape shifting. I've seen many conspiracy theories about there's so many conspiracy theories demonizing the royal families of every country. You can just find them online. It's not just the British royal family. Every royal family in the world always has, conspiracy theories about them. And, this is just something you have to watch out for. Some of them may be true, but most of them, are probably lies used to mock people, used to mock them for no reason. But this conspiracy theory about Queen Elizabeth has me thinking. The conspiracy theory goes like this. It states that Queen Elizabeth is actually millions of years old. Nobody has lived millions of years old. At least I don't think anyone can live millions of years old. But the conspiracy theory states that Queen Elizabeth is actually millions of years old. And that, she changes, her soul switches bodies every 100 years. Every time her old body dies, before her old body dies, she shifts to a new body. That's blood related to her. So it goes like this. Queen Elizabeth will have a child, right? And before she dies, she takes over the body of her child, female child. And this has been going on for centuries, millions of years. The conspiracy theory states that she's been, shape-shifting bodies and controlling the world from behind the scenes. She's the ruler of the world, blah, 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 and things like that, and that she's still alive, hidden somewhere. So because of that, I don't believe that conspiracy theory in any way, shape, or form. I actually don't think it's true. Because I don't think anyone can live millions of years old, especially someone that shapeshifts into different bodies every few years, every few decades. But that conspiracy theory has me thinking, if a princess or prince ever comes to your doorstep, right, and asks to marry you, and then during the marriage process, you find out she's actually millions of years old. She's actually one of those millions of years old, demons that's been around for millions of years and been shifting bodies. Would you still marry her? Or would you still marry him? If you find out the princess, out of everybody in the world, the princess decided to marry you, right? And then during the marriage process, you find out that princess is actually millions of years old. The person inside that body is not the princess. It's an old woman from millions of years ago inside that body watching you from the body of the princess. You see a young body there, but behind the scenes is an old, extremely old and withered old woman hidden inside that body. Would you be willing to marry her? And not to mention, in the future, right? If you guys ever have kids, right? If you ever have kids and she has, daughters, which, she'll probably force you to have kids in the future, right? Because that's a purpose. She forced you to have kids in the future. And then your child, your daughter, she will kill your daughter and take over her body in the future. Would you be willing to marry a woman who you know for a fact is a shape-shifting demon from millions of years ago? A shape-shifting demon from millions of years ago. I call it a demon because there's no way a human being can live that long. There's no way a human being can shift bodies, like clothing articles, There's no way a human being can shift bodies like that. So the man or woman shift bodies, and then you marry her or you marry him, right? And then you have to, you have to realize that in the future, one of your children will be killed by that person and their bodies will be taken over. Would you be willing to marry someone who will kill your child in the future and take over their bodies and then pretend to be him or her for the rest of her life? Would you be willing to marry someone like that? Me? Maybe. But I probably won't be having kids. I would definitely not be having kids. I would get a vasectomy behind her back in a heartbeat. I'll marry her and then give her that, what do you call it? I'll catfish. It'll be a catfish. I'll catfish her in a heartbeat. I'll marry without the slightest desire to have children. That way my children don't get killed by her in the future. But then there's a problem though. If she knows I don't want to have kids, right? Or we try having kids and nothing happens. Or she may end up trying to kill me for for lying to her that I can have kids when we're married. There's also the other fact that she may end up having kids with somebody else, and then breaking up with me, having kids with somebody else, and then taking over that body that way, and then becoming the new leader of the country behind the scenes, behind the world. I mean, the new leader of the world behind the scenes. But this is something you have to think about. I don't think I'll ever be marrying, I'll ever truly marry someone that's millions of years old. That's way too old for me. Even if the body is new, the soul is millions of years old. That's an old person, man. You're marrying someone older than your grandparents. You're marrying someone way, way older than your grandparents. You're marrying someone that's, that may be older than the universe, that may be older than humanity itself, man. Someone almost at the age of, dinosaurs, man. That's who you're marrying, man. You marry someone very, very old. Marry someone way too old. I'm not gonna marry someone that old, man. That's way too much for me. So that's something to think about. Think about it, man. If you marry someone that old, right? Instead of looking at your children like their joy, they'll be looking at your children like, ooh, that child right there, he has strong bones. I'd like to take over that body in the future. That child is growing up to be handsome. That child is growing up to be beautiful, man. I will need to kill that child soon and take over her body. I need to kill that child soon and take over his body. Oh, I need to take over that body so quickly. Think about it. If you marry her, although you become the prince, you become a princess or prince through marriage, but you have to deal with someone who will be looking at your children like that, like a predator. You're looking at your children like a predator. All your children, if you have 5 kids with her, every one of those kids, at least one of those children, something bad will happen to them. One of these days, when she turns 16, 17, 18, she could end up dying. You could end up dying and being replaced by your own wife. You know what's weird? Marrying someone, right? And then after you married her, like 10 years pass, 15 years pass, and then she kills your daughter and takes over her body. Now your daughter is not your wife. Don't you find it weird that your daughter would then become your wife? But you can't call your daughter your wife, because if you call your daughter your wife, you give it all away. It's supposed to be a secret. She secretly entered your daughter's body. Now she's controlling your daughter from the inside out. And everybody thinks your wife, her original body, has died, from cancer or from, some sort of drug or from some sort of poison. Yet here you are around your daughter, and you have to treat her like your wife. Or better yet, you have to run away from her because now she's going to marry, she needs to go marry someone else. You're now a puppet king or a puppet prince. You may not even be able to rule the throne anymore, or you now have to be, part of royalty because you've overstayed your use. You were only there for her to have children with. Now that she has children with, what do you think will happen to you? Will she still want you? Will she still want someone who could tell her secrets anytime? That one of his children is actually her in disguise? Would you want to be around somebody? Would you want to marry someone who could take over the body of your child? And then after she takes over the body of your child, now she's thinking about killing you to keep her secrets? Just to make sure you don't tell everyone, that's not my child. That's not my child, man. That person, that that is so childish, man. That's not my child. That's my wife. How can you open your mouth and just tell everyone in the world, hey, that's not my child, man. That's my wife. Can you really open your mouth and tell your parents, if you marry someone like that? Can you really open your mouth and tell your parents, hey, that's not my wife, that's my child? Oh no, that's not my child, man. My child died a long time ago. That's my wife. Are you really? Do you really think you'll be able to do that? If someone finds, because your parents will probably be around the child. Hopefully, your parents will probably be around the child once in a while, right? Growing up, your parents will come and visit. They see their grandchildren, and then when the child turns 18, you immediately change it to somebody else. Don't you think your parents will find it suspicious that that one girl, that one daughter of theirs, that one granddaughter of theirs just switched personalities overnight? She's no longer the way she was before. She's changed. She's now, she's not the new ruler of of the country. And you find out what's going on. They're asking you questions like, what's going on? What's wrong with your daughter? Why did her personality change so much? What is wrong with her? And do you really think you'll be able to open your mouth and say, yes, mom, yes, dad, you were right. That's not my daughter. That's my wife. Are you willing to say that? Would you be willing to say something like that to your parents? That you married someone who could turn into your daughter within a few decades, within over a decade, within 2 decades at least, your daughter would become your wife. Would you really be willing to tell your parents that you married a woman? Yes, she's the princess of the country, right? So you married a princess of a country, but now the princess of a country miraculously disappeared when your daughter turned 18. And now your daughter is now your wife. Your daughter starts treating your parents like your wife treats your parents weirdly. And now your parents are spooked out and they're asking you questions. Why is my granddaughter so different? She didn't behave like this before. What did you guys do to my granddaughter? And are you willing to open your mouth to tell your parents that, yes, I married her knowing full well that she was going to take over my daughter's body. And that woman right there is not my daughter anymore. That's my wife. Do you really think that's so for the people that, are willing to marry someone like that, do you think you'll be able to tell your parents that in the future? So what if your parents start asking you questions like, what happened? What do you mean that woman right there? What do you mean my granddaughter is your wife? And then you tell them that when you married, right? You married with the clause that she will shapeshift into your daughter in the future. And your daughter is practically dead. There's nobody in there except your wife now. Only her soul, her old evil soul is still in that body. Only her evil soul is there controlling your daughter's body like a puppet. You guys are no longer married. No, although she's not your daughter, you have to treat her like your daughter now. You can't treat her like your wife anymore. And you have to see your wife marry somebody else. As you grow older, this woman now that's your wife, you know she's your wife, right? And although she's taking over the body of your daughter, she's still your wife. But because of the clause, she's now your daughter. In front of everybody else, she's now your daughter, right? So as you grow older, you end up watching your daughter marry somebody else. You end up watching your wife that you married, that you had kids with, grow up and marry somebody else right in front of your very eyes and have kids with them. Would you be willing to marry someone who will marry somebody else before your very eyes, using the body of your daughter, using the body of your kid in the future? Someone, isn't that cheating? Would you consider that cheating if your daughter, who's your wife, marries somebody else while you're supposedly still in a relationship with her? Yes, her body is dead. The body you married is dead. But technically, that soul, that old soul, that demonic soul is still your wife. So would you be willing to allow her to marry somebody else in front of your very eyes using your daughter's body? Or would you say no? My wife cannot marry anyone else while I'm still alive. But you have to remember, she's the princess. She's the one with the power. She's the old millions of years old demon king. So if you ever try to yell at her, if you ever try to tell her not to marry someone else, you could go missing. You know that, right? So this is something you have to factor in if you decide to ever marry someone, that's millions of years old in the body of a human, in the body of a young person. Would you still be willing to marry someone who's millions of years old that's using a young person's body to marry you? Would you be willing to marry that person? Think about it, man. I think that's what that's why I don't believe the conspiracy theory about Queen Elizabeth. It's just way too hard for someone who's millions of years old to actually marry someone. Well, I know there's you can keep it a secret. From her point of view, someone who's millions of years old is probably very, very wise, or someone, very, very smart. So maybe they'll be able to keep it a secret, They'll marry you without you knowing that, they're millions of years old. But after the marriage, that's when you start noticing that weird things start happening. She looks, she behaves like a very old person. She's only 18 years old, but she behaves like a very, very old, person. They don't refer to her as her real name. They refer to her as Queen Elizabeth. Her name publicly is Josephine, but privately everyone just keeps calling her Queen Elizabeth. And you're like, but I married Josephine. Who's Queen Elizabeth? And then slowly but surely you start to realize, after you marry this person, you start to realize that, hey, this woman is old, millions of years old, and she's the ruler of the world. Would you be willing to marry the ruler of the world if you realize she's millions of years old and would take the body of your child in the future? That's something to think about. For the woman out there, would you be willing to marry a man who you know for a fact will take over your son's body? You have kids with him, he'll take over your son's body, right? When he turns 18. And after he turns 18, he'll date someone else and start sleeping with someone else right before your very eyes. And have kids with someone else using your son's body. Is that something you're willing to do? The upside is you're dating a princess or you're dating a prince. The downside is you're going to have to watch that prince kill your child and take over his body in the future. So that's something you have to think about. But I don't really believe that conspiracy theory because I don't think it's actually possible. There are way too many men, if they ever find out they're dating someone, they're married to someone who, a shape-shifting woman from millions of years old, will try to sell that person out in a heartbeat. We'll try to tell everybody about what's happening, all the secrets, in a heartbeat. Maybe we'll try to kill the person. So it's hard to keep, every year, every time the person, if this conspiracy theory was true, every time the person married or had children with someone else, right? That was a chance that the person that they married would sell them out, Is a chance for them to get caught doing what they're doing. And the longer they do it, the higher the chance of them getting caught, the higher the chance of their secrets coming out. So you can only do it for so long before everyone finds out, you've been shape-shifting for millions of years, or you've been shape-shifting for hundreds of years, and all your children, all your great-great-great-great-grandchildren from history till now have all been you. You've been shape-shifting from one grandchild to the next, from one child to the next, for centuries, for hundreds of years, for thousands of years. It's only a matter of time before people find out who you are and, the secret comes to light. So I don't really believe that's possible. Besides, what means, how do you even shapeshift from body to body, That's pretty much almost impossible unless you have some sort of, extremely technologically advanced, machinery that can do it. But I don't think we've ever had something like that. So I don't really think it's possible for it to, but that's something to think about. If that thing ever happens to you, are you willing? Would you be willing to marry someone who will take over your child's body in the future and then start sleeping with someone else, using your child's body Not only did she take over your child's body without her permission, right? She killed your child and took over her body without her permission. Now she's using your child's body without her permission to sleep with other people. People that your child may not like. She's sleeping with people that your child may not like. Using her body without her permission. Without your permission as well. Because now she's taking the role of your child. She's taking the role of your child. She has to behave like your child. That means get married and have kids. Just like a child would. Would you be willing to watch your child, your husband or wife, right? Would you be willing to watch your husband or wife marry enter the body of your child, then marry someone else, and then sleep with them and have kids before your very eyes? That's something to think about. That's it for this episode. Have a great day.